So, like you heard, this session is called Spa Made Breezy. You know, every girl dreams about it. And I think there might be some misunderstanding because I know exactly what she was talking about. You know, when you talk about spa, you think about stuff like that. And breezes, you know, of course, you want to have something like that. And I was thinking, why that? I think it's a misunderstanding somewhere, because actually what I wanted to talk about is single-page applications with Breeze.js. So for all of you that are so disappointed, I have to, to apologize from the very beginning, but that's what we are going to talk. But before I start talking, I was trying to understand why, this misunderstanding, why this thing. And I mean, I know to say dzień dobry, and it means that we can communicate, doesn't it? And then I start looking around, and yesterday I found this, the hardest language to learn, and for real, that's no joke. By looking at, looking on Facebook and on internet, and of course the internet is always right, they said that the hardest language to learn is Polish. And then skimming the whole list, I know some Romanian, I know some Swedish, and I know some English, but English is the last one on the list, so it's clear why do we have this problem. So, feeling from, like this, the world's strongest man, actually, the truth is this, So, the Polish are actually the strongest ones, not me. So, for those of you that haven't been here 2 years ago and do not know who am I, my name is Tiberiu Covaci. I'm from Romania, and I worked in this industry for the past 20 years. Since 2004, I do a lot of trainings for Microsoft.NET. So, by the way, a disclaimer, I'm a C# programmer and I will do some JavaScript. So if it doesn't work the way it's expected, you might understand why. I do a lot of training and mentoring. Now I'm back in Romania after living for 15 years in Sweden and 1 year in the beautiful Bermuda. By the way, the previous picture you saw were my girls in Bermuda. I'm an MVP for Windows Azure. I have no idea what Windows Azure is all about, but I am an MVP on Windows Azure. And I am a father and a geek. I do have 2 daughters, as I said earlier. You can find me on Twitter as Tibor19. And if you want to talk about this conference, you can use the hashtag ABBDevDay, without an S. I was always putting an S at the end, but realizing that it's only 1 day for the conference. So, agenda, what is SPA, some of the technologies, and I will do a demo with using Breeze.js. I've done this, or I tried to do this talk several times before, and I never managed to do it. For one simple reason, every single time when I ask how many people were working with Knockout, for instance, before, or with some SPA technologies, I got very few hands. So, can you show me how many of you have looked at that, and how many of you worked with that? So now it starts to be much better. So people start to look more and more at that. And mainly because Microsoft started to push it as well. They were starting to talk about SPA many years ago. I've seen their first version of Upshot, and I've seen Knockout when it first came out, and I was very impressed for one simple reason. I worked before with XAML and with WPF and Silverlight applications, and the data binding way of thinking, it makes the separation of concerns much nicer. And then I started to look more and more into it. And Microsoft, of course, killed Upshot because they felt, nah, who needs that? Nobody needs that. So every single time when I try to do this presentation, I end up actually talking about Knockout, I end up talking about Durandal, and then I had 5 minutes at the end to show Breeze and actually just to show where the site for Breeze is. So this time I hope, it looks like I will do it completely different. But before I get there, for those of you that haven't seen or haven't worked with SPA before, the whole idea behind it is that it should be a rich client application, but this time written in HTML and JavaScript. I think you all heard the story before. We want to do one technology to rule them all. Then we got Silverlight. We will have it in all the browsers. It has support for Linux, for Apple, for whatever you want it, you name it, Silverlight will be there. Until Microsoft had that shift in strategy, was called, going to HTML5. So that's when everything changed again. So now we are looking at new technologies and we are trying to work with those. But as it looks, it got quite a traction. If you look around, there are a lot of people that are talking about that are actually creating applications. And another disclaimer, I will talk about Breeze at the end, and I'm actually helping them. I'm working together with them in different projects and going as a mentor, help them actually to decide how to use the different technologies, how to use different SPA frameworks, and even doing some development work as well. So, why? Because everything should be, unicorns and rainbows, or should be, but it's not. But Microsoft has this vision, one framework to rule them all. It's still there, the vision. How many of you have looked at the release candidate of Visual Studio 2013? Only a few. I will tell you, I have it on my machine actually. I was afraid that I won't be able to show it to you, but Microsoft released it to the public like a couple of days ago. When you want to start a new application now in Visual Studio 2013, there is only one choice, ASP.NET Web Application. And in that, like a buffet, you can choose, do you want SPA, do you want MVC, do you want web forms? And based on that, they would add necessary dependencies, they would add the folders that you would need, they will configure routes and everything. So you don't have to go through all those, 10 different templates, which one do I choose, how do I make them work together afterwards? I started with a web form, now I want MVC in the same project, and so on. So they want to change, and they actually do that. Single page application, it's only one of those technologies. So it's not, it's not a replacement for MVC, it's not a replacement for web form, but it's one of those technologies that you can pick from the buffet. And of course, you can have services, you can use Web API, you can use Signaler, and so on. So hybrid is actually the norm. It's not that we want only one technology to use everything. There is no silver bullet, no one pattern that would fit will be the best, and it's not about a revolution. It's simply an evolution. It's what the customers want and what Microsoft tries to offer. So, Knockout in 3 slides. It's an MVVM framework. It actually gives us support for data binding on the HTML. It's an independent library. And it works pretty well with most other libraries out there. It comes part of Visual Studio 2012 Update 2 already. So if you update your Visual Studio 2012 to the Update 2, you will get the possibility to choose one template called Single Page Application, and that's what I would use in my demo a little bit later. It uses declarative bindings. It's using a pub subsystem where you get automatic refresh and dependency tracking, and it has support for different kind of templates. And I've been impressed actually, how easy it is nowadays to develop new applications. I can actually do my work in JavaScript and C# without caring about the HTML and about the CSS, and just giving that to a designer and actually making my code or my application look pretty. Never happened to me before. I don't know how many of you had that experience. You do, as a developer, you do application and it looks nice. No, we are not designers. But now actually I can communicate with a designer fairly easy. And they can do their job without interfering with mine. And they use a concept called observables. And observable is actually, it looks like a property in C#, but it's a method. And because it's a method, you have to remember to put the parentheses. It will be a bit of a hassle at the beginning when you start to work with them. Sometimes you'll forget them and you see why it's not working. Instead of showing me the value, it shows me the body of a function or something like that. But you'll soon get used to and you'll understand exactly where that's come from, and it will help you do a much better job. We have observable arrays, an array that you can actually, in WPF, you had two kind of, you have an iNotification property change and iNotification collection change, or whatever the name is. That's the counterpart in Knockout. And they have the option of computed observables. When you have several observables that you want to, or values inside an object, and you want together to create a new property inside your JavaScript DTO or object or whatever you want to call it. And they have support for bindings. So inside HTML, you just add your own bindings, and you can add the text information. You can actually bind to input values and stuff like that, and makes it much easier. You don't have to remember, oh, where do I get that from? How do I read that? You just bind the JavaScript object to an DOM element, and then all of a sudden you get this possibility for two-way data binding or one-way data binding, depending if you use or not observables. You can create your own bindings. You can use different kind of rendering templates. You have the possibility for loops. So there are a lot of options there. If you want to learn more, there is a Knockout.js.com. They are having actually a possibility for you to go there and try out and create your own application, your own Knockout application using that. Another technology that's actually very useful, it's called Durandal. Durandal is the missing piece, or between Knockout and Angular.js. A lot of people are using Angular.js because it's one product and you get support for routing, you get all the orchestration necessary for you to create your applications. And by the way, after lunch, Harry would have a session about Angular.js, so you can see how much differs or how much it looks the same compared with Knockout and Durandal. It has support for application lifecycle. How many of you have used MVVM kind of thinking in Windows Presentation Foundation or Silverlight? How many of you have used Caliburn Micro? Some of you. Durandal is actually written by the same guy that wrote Caliburn Micro. So he learned a lot about what is necessary to have a working MVVM or MVC framework and applied those into this library, which is I'm very good at. I like it very much, actually, looking at it. It has support for navigation, supports for routing, supports for require, for instance, so you can load the dependencies in an asynchronous mode. Support for application bundling and optimization. So instead of sending hundreds of files, you can combine them in one bigger file, and then it knows exactly which parts to take. Something like sprites you would do in CSS, but with JavaScript and with HTML. You can use any backend technology. It's not dependent on anything. It's built on top of jQuery, Knockout, and Require.js. So those are actually are necessary in your application before you start using that. It integrates very well with other libraries, Sami.js for routing, or if you use Durandal 2.0, they have their own implementation for routing now, so you don't need Sami anymore. But if you want to use it, you can still use it. You can use jQuery and Bootstrap widgets, and then you get a very nice separation inside your application. And you have views and view models, and they do all the separation of concerns very nicely. You can learn more at durandal.js.com. Again, there are a lot of documentations. There are a lot of tutorials that you can use and learn that. So now we come to this to reach data on the client. And how can you do it? I mean, on .NET, on the server side, I'm working mainly with .NET, but this is actually platform independent at the end of the day. But on the .NET, we use Entity Framework, which makes our life pretty easy. We don't have to deal with all the SQL stuff. Not that it's very difficult, but we have a lot of SQL Server stuff in our application that we need to think about in our applications. By using Entity Framework, we can actually leave that aside. And we get a lot of functionality in that. And Entity Framework 6.0, it's even better than before. They did a lot of work on the SQL that gets generated in order to improve the performance. But how do we do that on the client side? So first of all, you need to think about client queries. If you get the data on the client side, how do you filter that data? How can you raffinate that data? How can you do projections, selections, and stuff like that? If you want to do caching, if I already brought the data from the server once on the client side, how do I work with that? How do I cache it? Or if you want to have change tracking, if I change something, how do I know it's changed? If I add something, how do I know it's new? So I can think about a lot of the scenarios. How do you do validations? You need to make sure that the data is valid, and you can do it on the server side. But then you get all this problem that you need to send back to the server, back and forth to the server, just to get an information about the validation. How do you do batch saving? Well, you can roll your own. That's very easy, isn't it? Look at Entity Framework. It took them 6 iterations to get to a good thing. Or actually, you can use Breeze.js. So Breeze.js, it's free, it's open source, it's using an MIT license. They have technical support and professional services. And of course, there won't be any new JavaScript library or functionality without a to-do application. Like every single one I've seen, every jQuery course, every JavaScript introduction, it's using this. And of course, I'm obliged to do the same. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I have a simple application here, and it's actually, I just created that by doing file, new, and I used the Visual Studio 2012 template to create a new application. So you can do like this, new project. You can either use the web one, as I told you, and that's 2013 when it says ASP.NET Web Application, where you can have the possibility to choose whatever you want. Or you can say, oh no, I want something from the old Visual Studio 2012. I'm not sure if that would stay in the, when they will release that to the market, but for the moment it's part of Visual Studio 2013. And I can choose, of course, that I want an MVC for web application. And there when I go, I can choose single page application. And by choosing a single page application, you get this functionality here. What I've done after I installed that, I've done two things. One, I was updating all the packages to the latest version, because the version it's coming with, it's with older libraries. And when I'm talking about older libraries, I'm talking like 2-month-old libraries, which are 2 versions old already. There are too many new things that came in the meantime. And I added the Breeze.web API package to my solution. The reason I did that is just because I wasn't sure if I would have any internet connection. I wasn't sure if it will work. So instead of having problems with Nugget and not being able to demo my application, I just create that. But this is what you get out of the box. So it's nothing. I haven't added anything yet to the application. So I'm starting that, and I'm using Google Internet Explorer for that, just to show you how a to-do application would look. Because I said to save the password here, it already saved the password, so I'm already logged in. Otherwise, if I would have been, if I wouldn't have been logged in, I would have had to create a user and add a password and so on. And this is pretty simple. I can press Add To-Do List, and it will add a new to-do list, and I can say my other list, and then actually. And I can say what do I want here and what do I want to add into my, into my list. And everything is saved automatically. I don't have to do anything with that. The application is written entirely in Knockout.js. So let me show you a little bit what it is required to have this application written in Knockout.js. So first of all, we have 5 different JavaScript files. One of them has to do with the login. So I'm using Ajax to log into my application. That I don't care about. Then I have the view model. The view model is actually what I get to see on the first page, where I get to see my to-do list, and when I get to see my to-do lists, and when I get to see my items inside my list. And then I have a data context. The data context is actually my way of saying how do I interact with a backend with a backend server. And then I have the model, which is actually, I need to add some stuff just to make it work with my application. If you think about it, I have, for instance, I need to somehow say to the user interface when I'm editing an element. And that has to do only with how my user interface works, not with my application itself. So I don't need to save this kind of data. And then I have some bindings. It's just a way to extend what Knockout does in order to do all this kind of nice looking feature when you start writing somewhere and you press enter and it gets sent to the database straight ahead. So when I get that, then I need to communicate with the server. In order for me to communicate with the server, I need a model. So the model is actually an item, and the item belongs to a list. The list has a list of items, and it has a user ID and a title. And then I have a context, and that context is the one actually responsible for talking with the database. That's the entity framework code first approach. But now I need to create DTOs. I need to create objects to be able to send the data from the server to the client. So I have a to-do item DTO where I take a to-do item, and based on that, I'm actually putting the data. I could have used, Microsoft maybe could have used AutoMapper. The whole point here is just to show you what do you need to do in order to make it work with that. And the to-do list, DTO as well, created this way. So this is actually the data that needs to be sent back and forth. And I have a controller. Actually, I have two controllers here. One controller called to-do controller. And the to-do controller, it's responsible to talk with every to-do item. So for every insert, update, delete, and whatever I want to do, I would need to have one method in my controller. And then I have a to-do list controller, and same goes here. Some other extras, like getting only the to-do list for the current user. So I need to make sure that I won't see the to-do list of my wife, because then I would know ahead what I have to do. So that's not an option. Or, how do you want to do ordering and all kind of stuff. So I do combine a lot of functionality both on the client side and on the server side. And if you would look at the code, it becomes pretty cumbersome. I can show you here, for instance, into the data context, I have all the calls that I need to do to the database. I did Ajax request, I need to do a post, I need to do, how to do savings, and everything needs to be implemented manually. And at one point, it can become actually pretty complicated. You can get into a lot of troubles by trying to do that. So if I'm trying now to use Breeze, I would have to do a few things. First of all, I need to install the package. So by installing the Breeze.web API, I get both the client side and the server side added to my application. So I get as well a Breeze Web API config, which will say, you know what, whatever starts with Breeze, I want you to use it as a Web API controller and just map, do the automatically mapping and whatever you need to do or you feel is necessary. I have the bundle config as well that I need to configure because I would need to bring Breeze into my application. So I would do that. Okay, like this. And then I need to do my to-dos. Some of the stuff I don't need anymore. For instance, the model I won't need anymore because it's obsolete. And I will write most of the functionality inside my data context. One other thing that I usually do in my project, it's trying to separate my application from the scripts that I'm getting from JavaScript. Like, having a reference folder and having a app folder from my application inside any web application you were working with before. So the way I do that is actually by taking the app from here and just moving it at the top level. So then whatever I add as a library, I add into the script, so I don't need to change that. Whatever I create for my application, I would add into this folder and I would work with it from there. And to make it work, I just need to remove this from there. And let's see. Yeah. So now I'm pointing actually to the right folder. I need to add some more. I need to do my own controller into the server side. And it's a very simple one. I just say add controller, and the kind of controller would be a web API controller, an empty one because I don't need anything else. And it will be called Breeze to do. It's an empty API controller, add, and I need to do some things with it, like marking that as a Breeze controller, come on, like this. So I got this, so this is a Breeze controller now, and then I need to add some functionality. One functionality would be, for instance, to have an HTTP GET, and that would be public string metadata. That's a way for me actually to get the information about what kind of data do I have in the database. And I need to get the data from somewhere. So in order for me to do that, I would need to have something like a context provider. Let's see, what's the problem with this? Oh, sorry, yeah. Like this, okay? So I need to create a entity framework context provider. That's a class provided by Breeze, and the entity framework context provider is actually a way for me to encapsulate any entity framework DB context object. And I would use the what was the name? To do context, the existing one, because I don't need to create one. To do context, to do item context, like this. And this would be called underscore context. And it would be equal with new entity framework provider quantity context, and I don't use any different connection string. And by doing that, like this, I would just say underscore context, actually return underscore context dot metadata. That easy. So in this way, I can create a communication channel between my server side and my client side, and to make sure that I can actually send the information that is necessary. Another thing I will need to do is to do save changes. So I will do public save result, save changes. Of course, this one I want to be sent as a post. I missed something somewhere? Because the formatting seems a bit odd. And I'll do return underscore context dot save changes. The save changes takes actually a save bundle of type JObject, save bundle. So all my changes will come as part of this object. And this one I will send here. Okay. And I want to send my data as an HTTP post, not as an HTTP GET. I need to make sure that I say that, otherwise I won't be able to save two big object graphs. And one more thing I'll need to do is just to return the data back to this, to whatever, or to whomever needs some data from my application. So what I would need to do, I would say again HTTP GET, and then I would say public iQueryable. I need to make it an iQueryable, because if I make it an iQueryable, then I can actually to do list. Then I can actually send queries via OData from the client into the server and make sure that I get the right data to the client, but this is done behind the curtains. I don't need to do anything manually. So I would say to do list, like that. So this is a method, and the method would be as simple as return underscore context dot to do dot context dot to do lists. And now I want to make a filtering on the data, but the only filtering I need to do here is a where clause, where I'm saying I need only to give me the to-do list of the, so to-do list of all the, only for the current user. So how do I get the current user? I'll say tl.userid, which is a string, equals with user.principal or identity.name. So I get it only for the current user. I need to do only one more thing here. In order for me to be sure that this is correct information, I need to make sure that the user is logged in. Otherwise, I can actually call the method without the user logged in, and then the name would be empty, and it might return wrong information. So the way to do that is either put it on the controller. I can do that, like authorize here. So this is pure MVC, or I can put it per method. For instance, metadata would make sense to send it to anyone, even if you are not logged in. I can use some out-of-bound calls into my server, and then from the server I get the metadata already, so I don't have to wait whenever I need whenever I need data. And metadata normally is called only once, and then when it's called, you will get all this information. So this is the server side, and that's it. I don't need to do any. If you look at the two controllers that are created by the template in the Knockout or a single page application, and this one, you would see that this one is much simpler. Now what we need to do is to go on the client side and try to make some changes into the application. So what I need to do is to go into my view model. And then the view model has a to-do list, has an error, has a method that's add to-do list, which normally we don't need, a show to-do list, delete, but what we need to do is actually to call this get to-do list. And get to-do list, it's part of the data context. So inside the data context, we can go here and rewrite the method. In order for me to rewrite the method, I need to use Breeze as a dependency. So I would say Breeze comes already in here, Breeze. And then I would say var manager dot data, wait, equals Breeze. It's a difficult position to write code. Dot, and Breeze has a create manager, entity manager, and the entity manager, it will have a configuration function, or we can just use a connection string or a to-do REST endpoint. And that would be Breeze, and then what was the name of the controller? Breeze to do controller, this one. Okay, let's see, authorization, I don't care, API config, it's done already. No, where is it? Here. Let's do like this. So this is where I create the manager. Now, next step would be to get the data. And we get the data by calling the getToDoList method, like this, which is here. And instead of doing an Ajax request, I would do a Breeze request. So I would say like that, return. Breeze uses something called promises. So promises is like asynchronous methods in C#. So instead of returning a value, I'm returning a promise saying that when this method is done, I will call your success or your failure method, whatever you are configuring for this application. So I would say return, and I would say Breeze dot execute query, or no, it's query manager, how it's called. No, it's entity query, sorry. Entity query. Entity query. Where is it? Entity query dot from what? From, okay. From where do I need to get the data? What's the name of the method? It's to do lists. Like this. I can do order by, for instance, if I want to do that. Or I can even say expand, because I need to send only one query, and inside that query I need to include as well my to-do item. So I don't need to do two different queries in order to be able to include all the data. That's why you need it with the Knockout.js. You need it actually to have a DTO and the regular object, because the regular object was reading the data and the DTO was responsible for reading the dependencies as well. So by saying here, where is it? Expand to-dos dot execute. So I will say execute that. And I have the possibility to execute that, against different data stores. So same query can be executed against different data stores. I can use one as a caching one as a live data one. I can say which one I want to use. I say using, and then the manager that I just defined a bit earlier. And then that's the queue that says, when you're done, please run my success method, which is get succeeded, that we had before, or if you do fail, please call the fail method, and the fail method should be get failed, this one. Like this. So this is on the client side. And it looks a lot like language integrated query. It looks a lot like stuff you've seen before, I assume. I don't know, maybe, maybe not much. For me, it looks a lot like that. What I need to do now is to get the data from the result and send it to my to-do list observable. And I would do it just by say data.result. And it might be called results. Yes, indeed. I never know how it's called until I see the error into the JavaScript. Or I can take the error. So the error sent by the Breezy in here would actually be included into my application, and I can see a message out of it, or I can see from which entity, for instance, if I don't get any data or I have inconsistency or stuff like that, I still get the information on the client side. So, believe it or not, that's about it from the reading side. Now, I will have some problems if I run the application, but the problems will be caused by two reasons. One of them is that the view model that we need to do contains more data than the model itself in the database. And in order for me to make that work, I need to add this information to the entities I'm getting from the database, but just keeping them on the client side. I don't need to move them on the, I don't need to move them on the server side. But to make my client side working correctly, I'll need to do that. Another problem I will have here is the conventions. The normal convention, if you look at how JavaScript works in JSON, they are using camel case. .NET is using Pascal case. So whatever property I have, it starts with a capital letter on .NET, but if I'm using it on JavaScript, I need to start it with a small letter. So in order for me to do that, I need to configure Breeze to use some conventions. So how do I do that? I have actually a one line of code that says here, please Breeze be configured to use the naming convention of camel case. So let me close that, Breeze. And by the way, I need to add Breeze here to the list of parameters I'm sending into that method, so I'm not using the global object. Like this. So now I configured that to use camel case. Another thing I will need to do actually, as I told you, as I hinted, it's to add some functionality to my already existing to-do items and to-do list. And I do that by creating another method. And let me just take the existing method here, and I will walk you through and I will explain you why I need that. Okay. Like this. And I'll put it here. And I'll call this method just to make sure everything works correctly. So register entity types. So what I want to do is that every single time when Breeze wants to create a new data type or a new entity that comes from server, I need to make sure that it does that in the correct manner. And what do I have to say? I say, okay, I want you to register into the metadata store. I want you to register a special entity type constructor. So for all the to-do items, I want you to call a method called to-do item initializer. This one. And to-do item initializer would add to whatever you have before there. It will add to, where is it? To-do item initializer. It will just add the error message property. So then I won't have any problem with data binding and with missing functionality, and I can even show an error message to the user directly from my code without being, without having the necessity to add extra information. And then I need a to-do list initializer. To-do list initializer needs to specify when the list is editing, the title of the list is editing, in order for me to create the feeling that you don't have a text box, you just do the editing on place on a, on a div. A new to-do title just to be able to create for the items a new title and not have it sent to the database straight away. And then an error message in case we have an error message to be able to show it to the user. Two more methods that I need to do is the add to do method and the delete to do method. The delete to do will just remove an item. The add to do method will just add a new item to the list. And now, if we run the application, we should get the data from the server. We should. Something is missing. Control S. And I have an error here. Wait. So something is added extra. And what's that? I do have an extra parenthesis somewhere, and I need to find it. That's, yeah, very nice detective work, isn't it? Yes, it should be this one. Here. Woohoo! Talking about the haystack. And it's still not that one. Let me see, F12. Reference error, Breeze is not defined. Yeah, of course. Who saw me including Breeze? I did not. So this is what we need to add. We need to add the Breeze stuff at the end here. Come on. And this, like this, and we just use Breeze. So now, let's try again. It says Breeze is not defined. How come? Did I press save? Yes. It's not. That shouldn't be a problem. Reference it. Control S. F6, so it compiles. No. It still doesn't see Breeze for some reason. Let me do that element and see here the scripts. That's very strange. Sorry for that. It's let's see what the debugger said. Come on. Let's close it and open it again and see if it's anything changed in it. No? And everything is here. So for some reason doesn't want to.
Maybe the order of the bundle. Maybe the name of the bundle.
I think I called it Breeze. Let me see. Yeah, could be that I called it something different. Bundles Breeze. And I'm using Q, Breeze Debug, Breeze Mini, and I have bundles to do. Wait, the view model here, no, it doesn't use any model, and the data context doesn't use any model either, so that's not it either. Control S, build, rebuild, and yeah. Yeah, so Google couldn't find that. If Google cannot find it, where could that be? Come on. So let me try and, of course. So it should have been there. I will try again. We have 5 more minutes. To see more about Breeze, you can go and look at Breeze.js. One thing that you need to do more in the application actually is that whenever you do changes, you need to call the save changes method. You can either do it automatically like the knockout examples, or you can have a save button. By having a save button, it's much easier to send the changes, when you want, and you can have a batch of changes. And the nice thing with it is that you don't have to keep track of that. Whenever you change something, it will automatically be tracked by Breeze, and it will be sent in this save bundle object. There is a very good. They are very active on Stack Overflow. They are answering all the questions connected to the Breeze. If you have any problem, you can actually get an answer pretty quickly from that. You can use their site to create your own application, in a GS Fiddle-like way. You can see exactly how it works. They will give you some pointers, and there is even, if you use Visual Studio 2012 and you have installed update 2 of it, you would get you can get the Visual Studio extension that will create a new Breeze application. And the new Breeze application, Breeze single page application, would be exactly what I was trying to do here. It will have all the elements. You would see how do they do data reading, how do they do saving. And I think the main point with all of this is that it makes it much more simpler. And having the possibility to not think about, how do I use the REST API? How do I compact the data? How do I put the JSON in it? Because most of the time we don't care. If you really are down to the byte and you really want to see exactly every single bit that goes through the wire and you want to control that, maybe Breeze might not be for you. But if you're really there to do business value and to add functionality for your clients, I think it's much easier just to work that and use those kind of functionality. The same execute that I used has another version called execute locally, meaning that if you already read the data once, you can now, second time, run it against the local repository without needing to go to the server. So you already have that. Or even if you do an execute and you just want to get one entity by doing by ID, it will work by bringing it from the local. You can force it to bring it from the server, for instance, if you want to make sure that you get the latest version. But in normal situation, if you read something from the local store, you already, from the server, you already have it on the local store. The back office is not only .NET. There is a Ruby implementation. There is a Node.js with MongoDB implementation. And the client side, it's completely disconnected from the server side, so you can easily just change the backend technology without affecting the application on the client side, which I think is pretty neat. It's not dependent on web API or anything. Only what I was showing here was easier for us to look at it. So SPA seems like a good alternative, especially when you have everything that you can fit in one page, or if you have something like a wizard or something like that. Of course, you won't have the grid if that's what you want, but there are a lot of JavaScript, templates or all kind of controls that you can use that if that's what you miss. KO and data binding actually makes the code much cleaner. And I never showed you actually in details how the index CHTML looks like, because I'm using data binding in there. And by using a data-bind attribute on my attribute on my client, on my HTML, it does automatically the connection between my server and my application. And the way I get this information, or the way I get this to connect to each other, it's by calling this method at the end of my initialization called KO apply bindings. That's the only thing you have to do. And in the index HTML, I have all kind of functionality, like I need you to do, for instance, I need you to connect this button to the add to do list method. So I don't care about the implementation in the HTML. I don't care about having the code in line or anything like that. The code is part of the view model that I already connected to this DOM object. I have possibility to for each and stuff like that. So everything is pretty easy and pretty simple to follow. So again, if you want to play and see more in more details, the exact implementation, just take that from ASP.NET. Microsoft has it actually and endorse it. On the ASP.NET site, you have the Breeze extension for Visual Studio. Okay? So SPA, if you use Durandal, which I really recommend, it makes all the orchestration much easier. SPA becomes Breezy with KO and Durandal. And there is an application called TempHire that you can look up if you go on GitHub and look for Breeze. They have a sample application called TempHire, which is pretty advanced, and they use a lot of the patterns in there. And honestly, it's one of the applications that I've seen doing DDD the right way. I mean, by thinking about all the stuff with the repository and services and implement it actually with that in mind. And with that, I want to thank you. And let's have some lunch or maybe questions. Yeah? So, thank you.